You almost certainly ate corn today without ever seeing a single kernel. It's in your soda, your meat, your fuel tank, and 1,000 things you'd never suspect. The world grows more corn than any other grain on Earth, and yet most of it never touches a human plate at all. Let's start with the sheer scale of it because it's genuinely staggering. Every year, the world produces well over 1 billion tons of corn, more than wheat, more than rice, more than any other grain humanity grows. And a huge share of it comes from a single stretch of the American Midwest, the Corn Belt, centered on Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. The United States alone is the largest producer and exporter on the planet, accounting for more than a third of all corn traded worldwide. Drive across this region in summer, and you'll see corn stretching flat to the horizon in every direction, for hour after hour after hour. It is one of the largest, most concentrated agricultural efforts in human history. So the obvious question is, why corn above everything else? Part of the answer is that corn is a biological overachiever. It belongs to a special group of plants that use what scientists call C4 photosynthesis, a supercharged way of turning sunlight, water, and air into sugar. It's dramatically more efficient than the method most plants use, which means corn can pack on more growth faster than almost any other crop. A single kernel planted in spring becomes a plant taller than a person by late summer, carrying hundreds of new kernels of its own. Then layered on top of that natural gift, humans have spent over a century relentlessly breeding corn for yield, and more recently, engineering it. The result is a plant that produces an astonishing amount of food energy per acre, cheaply and reliably. In pure calories per field, very little else on Earth can compete. And to really understand corn's dominance, it helps to know where it came from, because its origin story is one of the most dramatic in all of agriculture. Corn did not exist in the wild. It was created. Thousands of years ago, farmers in southern Mexico began working with a scraggly, unpromising wild grass called teosinte. Teosinte's ears were tiny, barely the size of your finger, with just a handful of hard little kernels wrapped in shells so tough they could crack your teeth. It looked nothing like the fat, golden cobs we know today. Over thousands of years, generation after generation of farmers selected and replanted the biggest and best plants, slowly transforming that near-useless weed into the most productive grain on Earth. It was, in effect, the first great feat of genetic engineering, done entirely by hand over millennia. Modern corn is now so domesticated that it literally cannot survive without us. Its kernels are packed so tightly onto the cob that the plant can no longer scatter its own seeds. Corn and humanity are, at this point, completely dependent on one another. You might wonder why farmers landed so overwhelmingly on corn, rather than spreading across many different crops. The answer is that corn hits a rare sweet spot. It yields more calories and more starch per acre than almost any competitor, so a farmer earns more from the very same land. It's a hard, dry grain, which means it stores for months or even years without spoiling and ships easily anywhere in the world. It's endlessly versatile, able to become food, feed, fuel, or industrial material depending on where the market happens to pay best. And it slots neatly into a simple rotation with soybeans, which naturally restore some of the nitrogen that corn so greedily drains from the soil. No other single crop combines that much yield, storability, flexibility, and infrastructure support all at once. Wheat and rice each dominate their own corners of the globe. But for turning a flat, sunny, well-watered acre into the maximum possible amount of cheap, tradable energy, corn is very hard to beat. It simply won the competition on pure economics. But here is the twist that surprises almost everyone. We barely eat most of it. When you picture corn, you probably think of a buttered cob at a summer barbecue or a bag of popcorn. That sweet corn is real, but it's a tiny sliver of the total. The vast oceans of corn grown across the Midwest are something different. Field corn, a hard, starchy grain that you would not enjoy eating straight off the cob. It isn't grown to be eaten by people at all. It's grown to be a raw material, an industrial input, one of the cheapest sources of concentrated energy and starch on the planet. And that raw material flows out into the economy in 3 enormous rivers. The first and biggest river is animal feed. Roughly 40% of America's corn is eaten not by humans, but by livestock. Cattle, pigs, and chickens are fed mountains of corn because it's a cheap, dense package of calories that fattens them quickly. So when you eat a steak, a pork chop, a chicken breast, a scrambled egg, or a slice of cheese, you are, in a very real sense, eating corn. It has simply been converted first, passed through an animal, and turned into meat, milk, or eggs. A cornfield in Iowa is, in a way, a hamburger that hasn't happened yet. The astonishing cheapness of modern meat rests almost entirely on the astonishing cheapness of corn. The second river is even more surprising. A huge share of America's corn doesn't become food at all. It becomes fuel. More than 40% of the entire U.S. corn crop is turned into ethanol, an alcohol that's blended into ordinary gasoline. That's right, a plant is being grown on a massive scale, largely to power cars. When you fill up at almost any gas station in America, a chunk of what you're pumping started life as corn in a Midwestern field. Ethanol helps fuel burn a little cleaner, and it created a gigantic permanent new customer for corn overnight. Between livestock and fuel, well over 3/4 of the crop is accounted for before a single kernel ever reaches a kitchen. That decision to burn food as fuel deserves a closer look, because it didn't happen by accident. It was born from crisis. After the oil shocks of the 1970s left America desperate to reduce its dependence on foreign oil, the government began actively building a corn ethanol industry from scratch. Decades later, a law called the Renewable Fuel Standard locked it firmly in place, legally requiring billions of gallons of ethanol to be blended into the nation's gasoline every single year. Overnight, that guaranteed a demand for corn that would essentially never disappear. But it also ignited one of the fiercest debates in all of agriculture, the one often called food versus fuel. Critics argue it is deeply strange, even reckless, to devote tens of millions of acres of prime farmland to feeding cars instead of people, especially in years when food prices spike. Supporters counter that it props up rural economies and cuts emissions. Either way, roughly 2 out of every 5 rows of American corn now grow, in effect, to be poured into a fuel tank. The third river is the strangest of all, because it's nearly invisible. It flows into the processed food and industrial world, broken down in enormous mills into a whole chemistry set of ingredients. Corn becomes high-fructose corn syrup, the sweetener in countless sodas and snacks. It becomes cornstarch, corn oil, dextrose, and glucose. It's hiding in your bread, your salad dressing, your yogurt, your soup, your candy. And it doesn't stop at food. Corn ends up in adhesives, in some plastics, in cosmetics, in medicines, in the coating on your paper. This is why a journalist once famously said that if you analyze the modern Western diet, you'd find we are chemically mostly made of corn. It has quietly become the connective tissue of the entire food system. So corn is efficient and corn is useful. But that alone doesn't explain why farmers keep planting more of it year after year, even when prices are low. For that, you have to follow the money. Corn is the most subsidized crop in the United States, and it has been supported by the government since the 1930s. In a single recent year, corn farms received over $3 billion in federal subsidies, roughly a third of all farm support in the entire country. On top of direct payments, the government mandates that ethanol be blended into the nation's fuel, which guarantees a colossal, reliable market for the crop no matter what. Crop insurance protects growers against disaster. Put simply, the entire system is engineered to make planting corn one of the safest financial bets a farmer can make. And once a system like that exists, it becomes incredibly hard to escape. Because so much corn is grown, an entire universe of infrastructure has been built specifically to handle it. Grain elevators, rail lines, barges, and massive processing plants are all optimized for corn. Seed companies pour their research into better corn. Equipment is designed around corn. The knowledge in a farmer's head, passed down for generations, is corn knowledge. So a farmer in Iowa isn't really making a free choice each spring. They're plugged into a giant self-reinforcing machine that makes growing corn the path of least resistance at every single step. Everyone and everything around them is set up to reward one decision: plant more corn. This corn empire, though, is not free of consequences, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. Growing one crop across such a vast area year after year is hard on the land. It demands enormous quantities of fertilizer and water. And the nitrogen that washes off all those millions of corn acres flows down the rivers and into places like the Gulf of Mexico, where it fuels a massive dead zone, an area so starved of oxygen that little can live there. Critics also point out the strangeness of using so much prime farmland and so much taxpayer money to grow fuel for cars, and to flood the food supply with cheap sweeteners that some link to rising rates of diet-related disease. The efficiency of corn has come with a very real bill attached, which brings us to the heart of the matter and to the reason the world simply can't stop. Corn is no longer just a crop, it has become a foundation. It underpins the price of meat, so cheaper meat depends on it. It's woven into the fuel supply, so the price at the pump is tied to it. It sweetens and thickens a huge fraction of everything on the grocery shelf. Millions of jobs, entire rural economies, and trillions of dollars of infrastructure all rest on top of it. To suddenly stop growing corn wouldn't just change farming. It would send a shockwave through meat, fuel, food prices, and whole regions of the country all at once. It has simply grown too big and too deeply embedded to unwind. And while America dominates, this is very much a global story now. China is the world's second largest producer, planting nearly as many acres as the United States, largely to feed its own booming appetite for meat. As populations grow and get richer across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, they eat more meat, and more meat means more corn, because corn is what fattens the animals. This makes corn one of the quiet pillars of global food security, and at the same time a source of global fragility. When a major drought strikes the American Corn Belt, as it did severely in 2012, corn prices spike worldwide, rippling out into the cost of meat and food on the far side of the planet. A single bad summer in Iowa can mean more expensive dinners in Cairo or Beijing. So much of the world's food now leans on this one crop that its good years and bad years are felt almost everywhere, whether or not people ever realize their meal traces straight back to a Midwestern field. It's worth pausing on just how remarkable that is. A single grass, domesticated thousands of years ago by farmers in what is now Mexico, has been scaled up and re-engineered until it sits at the very center of the modern industrial economy. It feeds our animals, fuels our engines, sweetens our drinks, and fills our processed foods, mostly without us ever noticing. We think we grow corn to eat it. In truth, we've built an enormous machine that grows corn to feed itself. To feed the feedlots, the fuel plants, the mills, and the markets that all now depend on an endless golden river flowing out of the Midwest every autumn. So the next time you drive past an endless wall of corn, or pour a soda, or fill your tank, or sit down to a cheap and generous plate of meat, remember what you're really looking at. You're seeing the output of the most successful, most subsidized, most quietly powerful crop in human history. Corn stopped being simply food a long, long time ago. It became feed and fuel and sweetener and raw material all at once, stitched so tightly into how we live that pulling it out is almost unthinkable. That is why, for better and for worse, the world can't stop growing corn. If this changed the way you see that ordinary field of corn, follow along. There's a hidden world of engineering and economics behind absolutely everything on your plate.